So you want to be enlightened. You imagine it like this. A golden light beams down from the universe, your heart opens like a flower, and suddenly, all your problems vanish. Congratulations, you've just described an ad for scented candles. Real enlightenment doesn't feel like a spa day for your soul. It feels more like your entire worldview just got bulldozed by a quiet, smiling Zen monk who says nothing, and then walks away. Today, we're not going to give you 7 steps to spiritual bliss or sell you a crystal that vibrates at the same frequency as your chakras. What we will do is this: tear apart the illusion you've been holding about what awakening really means. This isn't the story of you becoming more. You're about to become less. A lot less. Ready? Let's be honest. The modern world has turned spiritual awakening into another item on the self-help shelf, right between green smoothies and gratitude journals. You've heard the buzzwords: high vibration, third eye, inner child healing, ascension. But here's the problem. People think it's about feeling peaceful all the time, or about becoming someone who speaks softly and smiles like they know something you don't. But enlightenment is not about becoming a better version of you. It's about the realization that the you you've been polishing never existed in the first place. It's not an upgrade. It's a deletion. And if that sounds scary, that's because it is. But it's also the most liberating thing you'll ever experience, if you're willing to let go. Let's strip the glitter off this word first. Enlightenment isn't a golden badge you earn after meditating under a tree or completing a 10-day silent retreat without screaming. It's not something you collect, achieve, or post about with a photo of you on a mountaintop at sunrise. It's what remains when everything else falls away. At its core, enlightenment is the direct perception of truth, raw, unfiltered, and without the tinted lenses of ego, identity, or expectation. It's like waking up in a world you've been dreaming through your whole life. The furniture is still the same, the bills still exist, your cat still knocks things off the counter, but something has shifted. You see without attachment. You live without clinging. You breathe without chasing. The tricky part: enlightenment doesn't add anything, it subtracts. It doesn't make you more. It makes you less. Or rather, it shows you that the you you've been defending, projecting, improving, that carefully curated personality is a construction. Useful, yes. Real, not quite. Think of it this way. If your identity was a beautifully crafted mask, enlightenment is the uncomfortable moment you realize it's been glued to your face for so long you forgot what skin feels like. It doesn't rip the mask off violently. It just loosens the adhesive, one quiet breath at a time, until you stop needing the mask at all. In Buddhism, they call this anatta, no self. It's not saying you don't exist, but that the fixed, independent I is a story, a convenient illusion. You still function, you still feel, but there's no puppeteer behind the curtain, just life, flowing. Eckhart Tolle, in his now classic The Power of Now, described enlightenment as the end of suffering, but not because life becomes perfect. It's because your resistance to what is stops. Pain doesn't vanish, but it loses its sharpness. Joy becomes quieter, subtler, less fireworks, more candlelight. You're no longer swinging between highs and lows like a spiritual roller coaster. You're on the ground now, solid, simple. Jiddu Krishnamurti went even further. He famously said, "Truth is a pathless land. There's no roadmap, no method, no system. Because the moment you try to systematize truth, you turn it into a product, something to sell, teach, package. But truth, real truth, lives outside all of that. It doesn't care about your beliefs or lineage or spiritual Instagram aesthetic. Real enlightenment is a quiet revolution, a subtle internal earthquake. And more often than not, it doesn't feel like light pouring into your soul. It feels like your illusions dying, one by one, sometimes gently, sometimes not. There's a phrase in Zen: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The difference? None, externally. But internally, everything has changed. You're not doing the actions for identity anymore. You're simply doing, being, existing. So let's be clear, enlightenment is not a goal. It's not a thing you can reach by climbing some spiritual ladder. It's the collapse of the ladder, the realization that there was never a place to get to. Only here, now. And here's the paradox. The more you chase enlightenment, the further you get. Why? Because the one chasing the seeker is the illusion. You can't seek your way into what you already are. It's like trying to find your own eyeballs. The search itself becomes the distraction. So what helps? Honesty. Radical, ruthless honesty. Watching your thoughts without needing them to be noble. Observing your need for meaning, approval, and certainty. Not to judge it, just to see it. That seeing, clean, open, agendaless, is the beginning of waking up. And no, this won't make you famous, or rich, or instantly peaceful. It may in fact make life a bit more confusing at first. Because when the stories fall away, so do the comforting lies. But in their place, something far more stable arises. Silence, stillness, and a knowing that doesn't come from books or teachers, it comes from you, or more precisely from that space within you that was never touched by conditioning, culture, or fear. The silent witness, the awareness itself, that's enlightenment. Not a light show, not a status, just reality, unwrapped, unsweetened, and somehow, even in its rawness, utterly beautiful. Let's get something straight. Most people don't want enlightenment. They want the idea of enlightenment, a glow-up for the soul, a spiritual highlight reel. And that's where the myths begin, wrapped in incense smoke and sold in soft-lit bookstores under the New Age section. This one's seductive. Who wouldn't want to be the awakened one in a room full of normies? You imagine yourself serene, above drama, floating a few inches off the ground while others wrestle with their egos. But here's the punchline. True enlightenment erases the very idea of being someone. You don't become more special, you become transparent. The ego, which thrives on comparison, dissolves, and with it, any desire to stand out. Ironically, the more enlightened someone claims to be, the more likely they're just performing spiritual theater. Real awakened beings, they don't need to announce it. They're too busy, not being anyone. Wouldn't that be nice? Permanent inner peace. No anxiety, no mood swings, just a 24/7 spiritual spa in your head. Sorry, that's not how it works. Enlightenment isn't a state of constant bliss. It's the end of inner resistance. You still feel pain, but you're not at war with it anymore. You still cry, but you don't drown. You still get angry, but it passes like weather through an open sky. What changes is your relationship to the storm. You stop pretending it shouldn't be raining. You get wet, you dry off, you move on. Enlightenment doesn't protect you from life. It just stops you from clinging to the illusion that life should be any different than it is. Cue the dramatic music. The seeker reaches the mountaintop. Cue the choirs, roll credits. No, enlightenment isn't the end. It's the beginning of living without your old story, without your spiritual ambitions, without the comfort of having a path. Enlightenment kills the seeker, but life keeps going. You still take out the trash, still get stuck in traffic, still feel hunger and heartbreak. But now you don't use those things to define yourself. You simply experience them, without commentary, without identity, and that's far more radical than any peak moment of arrival, because there's no finish line, just this, always this. Look, it's fun to imagine enlightenment as unlocking some Jedi-level awareness, seeing auras, talking to angels, downloading the secrets of the universe in your dreams. But those are side effects at best, distractions at worst. Psychic stuff is not enlightenment. Visions are just clouds. Enlightenment is the empty sky. You don't gain magical abilities. You lose the obsession with needing anything magical. The miracle becomes the mundane. Breathing, walking, watching a leaf fall and realizing, that's enough. Let's bury this one deep. Enlightenment doesn't make you a saint. It doesn't iron out your personality or turn you into a grinning guru who always says the right thing. Awakened people can still mess up, they just don't build an identity around it. Morality, in many cases, is ego in disguise. Look how good I am. Enlightenment moves from authenticity, not from performance. Sometimes that means being blunt, sometimes soft, but always real. You stop filtering for approval, not because you want to be edgy, but because you're no longer playing the approval game. Because the ego is sneaky. It turns even the most profound truths into self-improvement goals. It dresses up in spiritual robes and says, look, I'm closer to the light than you. It's scared of annihilation, so it builds castles out of candles and mantras. But real awakening threatens everything the ego clings to. That's why these myths are comforting. They let us keep the dream alive while pretending we've woken up. Here's the irony. The more glamorous your idea of enlightenment, the less ready you are for the real thing. The more you want it to make you more wise, more loved, more high vibe, the more you're avoiding the truth of everything you thought you were. So next time someone tells you they're enlightened, watch closely. If they seem very invested in that label, they probably aren't. The real ones don't claim anything. They don't even call it enlightenment. They just show up, empty, present, free. And if you find yourself clinging to any of these myths, don't worry, that's part of the path too. Sometimes the lies have to be believed before they can be let go. Just don't stay in the illusion too long. At some point, you'll feel it, the nagging sense that something's off, that all the peace and positivity and light feels like performance. That's your cue. The script is wearing thin. And behind it, stillness. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something real. Here's the part where expectations crash and burn. Enlightenment doesn't feel like stepping into heaven. It doesn't feel like being touched by angelic choirs. It doesn't feel like finally making it. In fact, if you're waiting for enlightenment to feel like something, you've already missed it. The most honest answer? Enlightenment often feels like nothing at all. And then suddenly, everything. It's subtle. It's quiet. It's shockingly ordinary. Like walking into a room you've walked into 1,000 times before, but this time you finally notice the silence. You notice the dust on the windowsill. You notice your breath, not as a technique, but as a living rhythm that has always been there. Sometimes it arrives like a thunderclap, a collapsing of mental scaffolding. One moment, you're caught in thought, worry, identity. The next, gone. Just space, clear, open, limitless, and terrifying because the you who was trying to hold everything together suddenly vanishes. No more narrator, no more lens, just direct perception. People think this sounds beautiful, and it can be, but more often it's profoundly destabilizing. You look in the mirror and don't know who's looking back. Not in a creepy way, just neutral. The usual inner dialogue? Silent. The impulse to define yourself? Absent. The endless commentary about right, wrong, better, worse? Gone. And with that silence comes an overwhelming stillness, a kind of weightless presence. You're not trying to be mindful, you just are. Awareness stops being something you do and becomes what you are. It's less like, I'm aware of the world, and more like, the world is appearing in awareness. That shift can shatter you. There's often grief for the person you thought you were, more you want it to, grief for the illusions you clung to, for the control you imagined you had. Sometimes people break down crying, not from sadness but from the magnitude of letting go. It's like your insides have been rewired to stop clinging to anything. That's not always peaceful, it's disorienting. Then there's the emptiness, not the nihilistic everything is pointless kind. More like everything is hollow, and that's okay. There's no weight to the stories anymore. Your trauma? Still there, but without the same grip. Your ambitions? Still present, but strangely irrelevant. Not gone, but transparent. And here's the paradox. This emptiness is full. It's not a void in the depressing sense. It's spacious, it's alive. It's the background of everything you experience. Before enlightenment, your emotions ruled the foreground. After, they still arise, but they pass like weather patterns through open sky. Nothing sticks, nothing defines. You might laugh, a lot. Not because things are funny, but because you see through the absurdity of everything you used to take so seriously. The drama, the goals, the spiritual hustle. You laugh because what else can you do when the cosmic joke is this good? You also might feel strangely alone. Not lonely. Just alone in the most intimate way, like the universe curled back in on itself and whispered, there's only this. And suddenly, you see it. There's no outside, no one coming to save you, no one to impress, no one to become, just life happening. The sense of time shifts too. The future loses its grip, the past becomes irrelevant. All that remains is the moment unfolding, again and again, like a wave that never ends. You don't live in the now, you realize there's nowhere else. And in the midst of all this, compassion blooms, not as an effort, not because it's virtuous, but because when there's no you to protect, there's only connection. You see yourself in others. Their pain feels familiar, not because you've read about it, but because all pain is the same when the boundaries dissolve. You don't need to fix them, you just feel with them. And that somehow is enough. But let's be real, enlightenment doesn't make you a floating monk. You still forget to do laundry, still get annoyed when someone cuts you off in traffic. The difference is, you don't turn those moments into identity. You don't say, I am an angry person, or I'm failing spiritually. You just notice the storm, let it pass, return to stillness. And the return becomes easier, faster. Like your inner compass is now tuned to silence instead of noise. You don't seek as much, don't need as much. You begin to trust the moment, not in a naive way, in a cellular way, because you've seen what's underneath it all, and it's not chaos, it's clarity. So what does enlightenment feel like? Sometimes like free-falling, sometimes like floating, sometimes like absolutely nothing, but always underneath it all, a kind of homecoming. A deep, wordless knowing that everything you ever chased was already here, that the one searching was never separate from what was sought. And if none of this makes perfect sense to your mind, that's okay. Enlightenment doesn't happen to your mind. It happens in the space the mind arises in. So if there's confusion, let it be. If there's fear, let it pass. Because underneath the noise, always, is the quiet you. The one who was never lost, just waiting to be remembered. Let's drop the spiritual wallpaper for a moment. Enlightenment isn't a soft glow or a peaceful meadow. It's not a romanticized transformation where everything becomes light and love. No. Enlightenment, when it truly strikes, feels more like demolition. It doesn't gently elevate you. It rips the floor out from under everything you've ever believed. Why? Because real awakening destroys your stories. All of them. The story of who you are. The story of how the world works. The story of good and bad, right and wrong, what matters and what doesn't. Enlightenment doesn't hand you new answers. It burns the questions, and you're left standing in the smoke, blinking, stunned, with nothing to hold on to. This is brutal, because we love our stories. We build our identities around them. We define ourselves by our trauma, our achievements, our spiritual progress, and then suddenly, none of it sticks. You see through the roles, the seeker, the healer, the victim, the warrior, the old soul, all masks, all costumes, all vapor, even the beautiful ones. The idea that you have a divine purpose, that you're meant to help the world, that you're growing every day, get incinerated in the light of what is. Because the truth doesn't need you to be anyone. It doesn't require a role, it just is. And that can feel like death, because in a way it is. You're not being punished, you're being stripped. The identity you've spent decades polishing is revealed to be unnecessary. And while there's relief in that, there's also grief. A raw, aching sense of loss, of realizing how much energy you've poured into protecting a phantom. This is the part no one puts on Instagram. The spiritual unraveling, the sobbing in silence, the staring at the ceiling because nothing makes sense anymore, the friends who drift away because you're not playing the same game, the fear that you've lost yourself, when really, you've just lost the illusion. What makes it even more intense is that this dismantling isn't a one-time event. It can come in waves, layers peeling off, each one taking a little more of what you thought was you, and every time it asks the same question: can you let go of this too? Your beliefs? Gone. Your ambitions? Rewritten. Even your spiritual ideas, yes, even those get pulled apart. Enlightenment doesn't care about your lineage, your favorite teachings, your devotion to a path. It's not impressed. It wants only the real. And the real is always here, underneath what you think. Here's the kicker. Enlightenment doesn't make you more certain. It makes you quieter, softer. Not in a timid way, but in a surrendered one. You stop needing to be right. You stop needing to explain. You become deeply okay with not knowing, because you've seen that everything the mind clings to passes. This terrifies the ego. The ego wants to build, to accumulate, to structure reality into something it can control. But awakening shows you there is no control. There never was. Life moves on its own. You were just narrating it, claiming authorship. Enlightenment pulls the pen from your hand and says, watch. That kind of freedom is devastating, until it's not. At first, it's like being thrown into the deep end without a map, but eventually you learn to float. Not because you've mastered anything, but because you stopped thrashing. You stopped pretending you were the swimmer. You realized you are the water. And then something strange happens. In the ruins of everything you thought mattered, something peaceful emerges. A stillness, a kind of invisible center that doesn't need to be named. You find yourself laughing more. Not because life is easier, but because it's lighter. Because you stop dragging a fictional self through it. You stop needing meaning in every moment. You stop converting experiences into lessons. Life stops being a syllabus and becomes a song. You don't know the lyrics, you don't control the melody, but you're dancing. Finally, truly dancing. But you had to be broken to move like that. Had to be emptied. Had to watch everything fall apart. Enlightenment doesn't polish you into a better version of yourself. It dissolves the mirror entirely until there's no reflection left to improve. That's the brutal beauty of it. Nothing is added, nothing is gained, and somehow it's enough, more than enough. The peace isn't in arriving anywhere. It's in finally realizing you were never going anywhere to begin with. So yes, enlightenment is brutal because it cares nothing for your comfort. It doesn't offer safety. It offers reality. And reality, when seen clearly, is not always pleasant, but it is always true. And once you see it, really see it, there's no going back. You wouldn't want to. So here you are, still watching, maybe confused, maybe intrigued, maybe slightly terrified. That's good. It means the story is cracking. Enlightenment isn't about understanding something new. It's about unknowing everything. It's about dropping the mask and staring into the mirror until you realize there's no face behind it. Just presence, stillness, freedom. If all of this sounds strange, it's because it is, but truth often is. And perhaps, just perhaps, the version of you who wanted to become better, more awakened, more spiritual, is quietly fading into the background. And what's left is the part of you that was never born, never changed, and never needed fixing in the first place. You're not broken, you're not separate, you're just here. If this video shook something inside you, leave a comment. Share your story, your questions, or your WTF was that moments. Subscribe for more paradoxes, uncomfortable truths, and maybe a little quiet liberation. And if you're still searching, maybe stop. The seeking was always the trap.